Welcome back to Fantasy and Faith, for a special episode. I'm your host, Nouri Jahangir, writer of fantasy fiction and dreamer of dreams. Joining me today are Robin C.M. Duncan and David Green from the British Fantasy Society. Robin is the editorial officer of the BFS and a Scot from Glasgow. Don't hold that against him, though. He works as a civil engineer and has been writing for a few decades. He's the author of the Quirk and Moth books and is featured in a number of anthologies. David Green is the secretary of the BFS. He's also the author of the Empire of Ruin series, which I'm currently reading. Together, they host one of the best podcasts out there, Long Story Short, which is the official BFS podcast. Hello and welcome to the show. Please tell my audience a bit more about yourselves.
You've got a pretty good summary of me there. Anyway, yes, I'm in. That's about the scope of my main activities at the moment. I'm in a couple of writing groups. I'm in the Glasgow Science Fiction Writers Circle, which is an excellent organisation here in Glasgow. Obviously, that's why I'm in it. And so there's that to mention as well. Yeah.
Thanks for having us on. It was a lovely introduction. I don't really know what else to say about myself, to be honest. I'm in Galway in Ireland, which is part of my campaign to change the British Fantasy Society to the British and Irish Fantasy Society. But we have quite a lot of Irish members, which is great actually, because a lot of the UK scene seems to be like London, Glasgow, and Edinburgh, and then there's a little bit in Yorkshire as well, but then it's few and far between elsewhere. In Ireland, particularly in speculative fiction, it's not. There's not a huge amount of support, I would say, even though there's a lot of writers and there's a lot of want for what the kind of things that we do. So we are actually looking. I've been putting quite a bit of energy in at the moment in terms of kind of doing a bit more presence in Ireland, which has been fun. It's been good, but it's something on the long run. We'll rename it at some point. We'll invade it. We'll get it in there.
Okay, thank you very much for those introductions. So the reason why I've asked you to join me on the podcast today is to talk about World Fantasy Con. So World Fantasy Con has a long history in supporting fantasy, science fiction, and horror genre. What makes it such an important event for fantasy writers and readers today?
You've let me go first, David, which is unfortunate because I have to admit I have never been to a World Fantasy Con. I've been to WorldCon, the World Science Fiction Convention twice, and I've been to 3 fantasy cons now. Despite my grey beard, I haven't been going to conventions for all that long. My first one was WorldCon in Dublin in 2019. But I have been trying to make up for lost time, so World Fantasy in Brighton will be my 15th convention. Mm-hmm. So I can speak sort of from the perspective of very large conventions like the WorldCon, for example. And yes, there's another question later on, which is an interesting one about the profile in the wider community, and I won't come on to that one too soon but it does kind of play into this thing, because I think in the genre world, WorldCon perhaps has a higher profile than World Fantasy. David might disagree with me.
No, I don't.
You don't? Good. No, that's good. So World Fantasy does occasionally come to the UK. I think it was in Brighton the last time it came. Mm-hmm. Is that right, David?
Yeah.
Many years ago. And I think it makes an impression here in the fantasy community, and especially because it's combined with FantasyCon as well this year. But the thing that always strikes me about the fantasy community is it really does feel like a community. Yes, there are a lot of people who know each other, but I think it's also welcoming to people who are first time at FantasyCon, and because the things being combined, we'll have a lot of international visitors, I'm sure, in Brighton, but that core community will still be there. So I think that's very important for the community to meet in person annually, and of course we'll have the added benefit this year of it being a wider sample of the community, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a funny one because there's a few things that are kind of against it being as big as Worldcon, for example. Like you say, it's not been in the UK for I think 12 years. I think 2013 was the last time. And the way that kind of World Fantasy Convention works is that it's a capped event, so there's only so many people that can attend it. Which is like obviously for Worldcon, it isn't like and FantasyCon and EasterCon we don't tend to have a cap on them. So there is a cap on it, which kind of limits that a little bit. Why? The reasons why I'm not sure. That's just something that the World Fantasy Convention people that kind of own the convention stipulate. But it does bring in people that wouldn't usually go to a FantasyCon or at EasterCon because it's got World in the title. I think so. It's so you do. I mean, if you look at the kind of guest of attendees or list of attendees for this year, there are a lot of people coming over from the States, for example. There's a lot of people coming over from Europe, which is great because there's a lot of talent in the UK. And I don't just mean like the headline people that you would think of UK genre speculative fiction writers, and I don't need to list them. We all kind of know when you say the ones. But there's a lot of people underneath that kind of like I don't want to say the word mid-list, but mid-list writers that are wonderful writers that don't really kind of maybe not get the spotlight on them as much, and then there's loads of brilliant self-published and independent writers that are working with small presses, and we're home to a lot of small presses like Luna Press and Flame Tree Press and Wizard's Tower and all these places that are brilliant that will get a little bit more of the limelight now because it is coming to their home, which is great. So hopefully it wouldn't take 12 years to come back again. And with the current climate and stuff around in the world, maybe it'll be coming over to the UK a little bit more. UK and Ireland. Hopefully Ireland will be great. More than it usually is, because it kind of stays in America. But as Robin was saying, like Worldcon is one that is usually the bigger, like much more bigger. And I think it's because it has got that. It does tend to travel around a little bit more. It isn't capped, and it does sci-fi as well. And I think there's more of a focus on science fiction than the fantasy and horror side with World Fantasy Convention. But looking forward to it. It's going to be great, and we'll be pushing straight away for it to come back a bit sooner.
So, I mean, for a newbie to conventions like me, what's the difference between all the different ones? You got World Fantasy Con, you got Worldcon that Robin was talking about earlier. You got EasterCon, which is at Birmingham next year. Then we got Chimera, which I learned about through your podcast. Robin went to it. David wasn't there.
I wasn't there, no.
Do you remember to mention that David wasn't there? Yes.
Yeah. And FantasyCon, which is happening in Glasgow next year, which will be my very first convention. So, what is the difference?
Right. And well, yeah, I mean, there is quite a few differences, isn't there? Because like in Chimera, I can't really. Obviously, I wasn't there this year, so Robin would be better to talk about that one. But yeah, so World Fantasy Convention is more of a networking convention than anything else. In terms of programming, it's kind of light on programming. There's a lot of rules from the board that mean that it's like I think there's only 2 tracks of programming. There's breaks during the day, lunchtime. There's nothing on. It finishes at a certain time every night and everything like that. Whereas FantasyCon, it is more of trying to bring readers into it as well. It's more of a fully kind of ecosystem of publishing, I suppose. And there's and not to say that World Fantasy Convention doesn't do that as well, but FantasyCon, there's more of an emphasis on that. There is a lot more programming there as well. There's multiple tracks of programming and all that kind of stuff. And it is kind of obviously because it's the British Fantasy Society, it is mainly focused on fantasy and horror, a little bit of science fiction. EasterCon would be the other way. It's kind of similar in terms of how it is set up to FantasyCon, but it's a little bit more focus on science fiction but then there is still fantasy and horror, but it's more of a focus on science fiction. But Chimera is a little bit different, isn't it, Robin?
Yes. So, I mean, in my head, yes, Worldcon is the World Science Fiction Convention, and it's governed, if you like, by the World Science Fiction Association,
Yes.
if I've got that correct. And as David said, World Fantasy has its own governance, if you like, who set the rules. And I'm slightly less familiar with it, so I don't know if it works in the same way that. So Worldcon is essentially constituted by its members, if you like, in any given year. So they vote on the Hugos. There's the organising committee is local. So the next year it will be a completely different personnel, if you like, that often with overlaps of people who go from one to the next one, but the committees are different. So it's the Worldcon kind of, as Bill Tracy pointed out in our last podcast, is kind of a different organising committee each year, which makes it feel a bit more local, but also it can have some organisational issues from time to time. Locally, if you like, EasterCon is basically the convention of the British Science Fiction Association. I think I'm right in saying, although again, the organising committees will be different each year. And similarly, FantasyCon, the BFS will receive bids to run FantasyCon from different teams each year, and will appoint bidders. Usually, there's only one bid. Is that fair to say, David? I don't think we tend to have competing bids, but
yeah, it's kind of. I mean, that's kind of going the way generally anyway with a lot of these things, because putting on a convention is like a hell of a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
And what the good thing about it is that a lot of them are getting bigger, which is great. But what that happens is, particularly in the UK, is there's not a lot of places that cater for the sizes that they're getting. In the past, FantasyCon in particular it could be held in venues that would be like sub 500 or even sub 400, but we're kind of getting to that number where we need about room for about 1,000 people. So that kind of means that we're all going to the same kind of places as each other because you don't want to go too big, because then you might not be able to fill it and it costs more money and all this kind of stuff. So what is happening is that like there's fewer and fewer people that are kind of bidding to hold these things because of the just how the expertise for it and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, like with FantasyCon the last couple of years, there's been, what will happen is if there's not a bidder that is approved, so we'll ask for people to come and give us like a plan of what they want to do, and if it isn't viable, anything that is viable goes to a vote at our AGMs and they vote for them. If we don't have a viable one, the British Fantasy Society has to run it ourselves, and that is what has happened in the last 2 years. Well, sorry, 2024 and 2026, and then 2025 it's part of World Fantasy Convention. I mean, and that's the way that a lot of these things work. You'll see, like with World Cons, there might be a couple of people bidding, but like for example, for Dublin 2029, I think it's only Dublin that are bidding for it. So it's it's probably going to be in Dublin. So it's because it is a lot of work, I mean, we have FantasyCon 2026 next October, and we started planning for that in March of this year. So it does take up a lot of time. They are a labour of love. Lots of things can go wrong, but if you hold one that is seen as a good one, it's a great feeling, and it's a great bit of joy to bring to the community.
And that's, you mentioned Chimera, Noor, and that's yes, that is a different type of thing from the other four that we've talked about, in that it has the same organising committee every year. It's in the same venue, or has been for 7 years or so. And it also gets some funding from Creative Scotland, and I think possibly another source. So it has a little bit more resource behind it, because it does also sell tickets in the same way that the others do. And it also has a slightly different profile in that it has there are workshops and things that go on in parallel, but it generally only has one track of sort of programming. It might have something going on online at the same time as in person, but there's a more focused program, if that makes sense. And the guests who are appearing on stage and panels and things like that tend to be on one event, if you like, and it's more focused in terms of, if you want to see someone, you'll see them generally at one thing. So, and I think it's more of a writer's event. It's termed as a literary convention rather than a genre literature convention, rather than festival. I beg your pardon, literary festival rather than a convention. And I think that's because it has maybe more of a professional profile to it, which is not to say it's not a great community, but I think it does tend to be a community of authors more than some of the others.
Mm. Yeah, and then you have smaller ones like BristolCon as well, which are which is all usually in October, and it's kind of getting a bit of a tough time at the minute because everything seems to be moving and shifting into October for various reasons. And BristolCon is kind of a smaller one. It is again genre fiction, and it is very very much based on, like, it's a community one where people will catch up. A lot of people that are showcased there are writers from the in and around the Bristol writing scene, which is actually really really vibrant, and it's a really really fun one because it's pretty kind of chill. It's what some people call it a bit more of a bar con, because it is that kind of atmosphere to it. But it's like it's got great paneling. There's really, if you want to have some time to spend with the likes of Mark Lawrence, who is local, he will be there, and you can just go and chat to him and have a drink with him and stuff like that. And it's a great one to kind of catch up. And what was great about it was usually kind of like the last one on the calendar for the year, so it was kind of the one where everyone would see each other for the last time and be like, "We'll see you in all at EasterCon and what have you." But because it's all been shifting around and everything now, it's the last couple of years, it's kind of um, fighting against some of the bigger ones. But it's not a competition either. It's great to get to as many of these as you can, and try to. I mean, we at the BFS try to support as many of these different conventions as we can, in whatever way that we can, because it's only beneficial for everyone the more these things are happening and the more people go to these things, and the more they can attract readers and emerging talents is only a good thing.
Yeah, talking about emerging talents, so what specific opportunities do conventions like World Fantasy Con provide that can help them grow their careers?
I think they certainly offer a chance to develop skills, and these are not writing skills, but more promotional skills, and that sounds rather cold, and it's not meant to. You're not. I've heard lots of advice from established writers on other podcasts in terms of how to go about navigating a convention, if that's the best, if that's a reasonable way to put it, and that what they tend to recommend is not to try and sell your book to people, but more to try and meet people and understand what people are about. And that might be other authors who are more established, or it might be publishers or agents, and these people do tend to be available to some extent at all the conventions to some degree or other. As David says, some conventions are maybe more fan based, or have a larger element of readers and fans, but still the publishers and the agents tend to be there in some to some degree. and that just meeting people and understanding what they are about. What are they excited about? For example, if you're, rather than necessarily trying to pitch an agent or a publisher your book, you understand what it is that they are looking for, or what it is that they're excited about at the moment. Was some of the advice that I heard, which struck me as very good, and basically sort of engage with them as people rather than as business opportunities, and find out what makes them tick. And it's we all know publishing is a pretty long game, depending on, even if you're a writer or an agent or whatever. It takes time to write a book, and then it takes time to find someone who is willing to read it, and then it takes more time to get to the person who's read it, who wants to then take it further, and develop it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, as I learned in going to conventions, it was very much a case of making contact with people and learning about them, hopefully becoming friends with them, and colleagues, in the sense of learning about how they write, and what sort of thing they write, and how they go about doing things, like how did you find an agent, and it's shared experience, I suppose, is what it is, and getting into that environment where you can talk with people on a kind of equal level, maybe not professionally, but in terms socially, and learn how they've navigated the industry, and how their journey has worked, can give you a different perspective on your own progress, if you like.
Yeah. And it's funny as well, because if you're coming into this as like, most people will do coming in as idolizing people's work, and sometimes idolizing the writers themselves, and you give them this kind of, like, you put them on a pedestal, you can't help it, can you? We all do it. And then when you kind of come to these things, you just realize that they're just normal people with a great talent, but they are just normal people, and they go through the exact same things that anyone else does who's approaching this. So they will have that thing where they've just been staring at a computer screen for 2 hours thinking, how the hell am I supposed to turn this into a book, right? Why aren't the ideas coming today? Or they'll have this thing where they've written something and go, what was I thinking? And they'll have all of these same things that you do, and it really kind of demystifies it all in a good way, because you can see it and you go, well, they are a talented person and they're amazing, and I still love their work, but they just have the exact same experiences that I do, and they've been through the whole thing. And you get to know these people, and you get to speak to them, and a lot of them, like 90% of them, are so free with the time and free with their advice and so approachable. And you can learn from them, and you get these kind of stories that they say where you might have taken years to get an agent, and it's like, well, this person who's a multi-award winning best-selling author also took years to get an agent, and you might have the agent, and it might be taking years to get your book purchased by a traditional publisher, and it's the same thing, and it gives you that kind of like bit of feeling, well, this is just the way that everything works, and everyone was in the same place at some time. So it's a really good thing for that, to kind of come in there and kind of see that it's the same for everyone. That those kind of rare success stories that get the agent straight away, get the publishing deal straight away, become huge big sellers straight away, are the exception, right? And that's something that's worth understanding when you're starting this thing, is that they really are the exception. It's a small percentage of people that explode like that. But you always hear about them, so you kind of think that this is the way, this is the way it's going to be, and if it doesn't happen for me, then I'm doing something wrong. It isn't, right? The other way is the way that it genuinely and generally is for everyone. And it's good to kind of, and it can be quite sobering, because you kind of look at these people again that you've put on this kind of pedestal, and you go, God, they were struggling for years to get this to work, and but they'll tell you why they were struggling for years, and so you might try to and be able to avoid that. So it's always good for that, and it's fun. It's there's great paneling. There's great book launches. There's parties. There's people are so welcoming. Me and Robin have both been in the position where it's been our first one when we didn't really know anyone else where we were going, and people welcomed us into it. So it's brilliant to go to for those things.
Yeah, and when I talked about developing skills, yes, there'll be certainly some conventions where there are multiple threads. Maybe there are fewer threads at World Fantasy, as David said, but you can generally find panels or workshops about the craft of writing, yes, but also about different aspects of publishing, how to pitch your book to an agent, how to write a synopsis, or different aspects of publishing. But there are also skills to be developed, like reading your work, and most of the conventions have the opportunity to book a reading slot and read something out, I would say it doesn't have to be something that's published. Some people, I've had a friend who said, well, I haven't got a book published, so I don't feel I can go to this convention. I mean, I would encourage anyone not to think that way, because you can book a 15-minute reading slot, which is how, like, 10 to 15 minutes is how long they tend to be, and there's nothing to prevent you from reading from a work that hasn't been published in my eyes. And it, even if you don't necessarily get a big audience, and I've been in a room with three people, three authors reading and three people sitting in the room, but even that gives you an appreciation that reading your work out loud to people is a skill, and that you can practice it and you can become better at it, and you can watch people doing that from the audience, and then say most conventions will give you the opportunity to try that. And I would definitely recommend that to people, because it's I think it's an important skill, and it can bring your work to people who wouldn't necessarily encounter it. Might not pick your book out of a list on a website or something like that, but might be attracted to, even if they're there to listen to one of the other authors that they do know, that you can still be reading to people who, and introducing your work to them, which is a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, even if you're not pitching your book as such, even if you're only speaking to a fellow author who or reader who just comes up to you and says, "What's your book about?" It's a really important skill, I think, to be able to describe your book in a relatively short sentence. And David's laughing because I'm sure he's been in the same place.
I could describe anyone else's book easily, but you're right. Describing your own book is so bloody hard to do. Because you want to talk about everything. You want to talk about everything.
You want to talk about everything all at once. Yeah. But it's a real skill, and it is very much something that's worth practicing. And I think that's just an example of how a convention can give you that opportunity to practice it, and to gain a real understanding of how to sum up your book, and how to come up with an attractive description of it, if you like, that makes people want to read it. So there all these little opportunities are and probably dozens more that I'm not thinking about off the top of my head are things that I think emerging writers maybe don't realize that they can learn from a convention.
Yeah.
But they absolutely can.
Yeah. And it's always great that, when you talk to that more kind of like not even the seasoned writers, but I mean, it's always a thrill when that happens. But when you talk to any writer, and they say, "Well, what's your book about?" and they're like, "God, that's a great idea. I wish I thought of that." That is always like so gratifying, because you're like, "Oh, great!" Especially if they're stood near their editor or their agent, and you're like, "Well, listen to that." They're excited about it.
And there's a friend of mine in the Glasgow Writers Circle who, Cameron Johnson, who has several books published by Angry Robot, and he always has the best one-line pitch, and I think it was The Last Shield. It was his last published book, I think, and his pitch for that was Die Hard in a Castle. And it's so neat. How many words is that? It's like 5 words or something like that. And it's just, but straight away you've got this appreciation of what it's about,
Yeah.
And something as simple as that can really engage a person, whether it's a reader or a
Right.
fellow author or even an agent. So yeah, you can get these opportunities at conventions, and even just learning about the industry and the shape of it, if you like, because everyone knows of the big names of publishing in the big five or big four or however many of them there are, but these smaller independent publishers will be at a lot of these conventions, and it certainly made me realize as a because when I went to the first the Dublin Worldcon, I didn't have any books out, and it really made me realize that there are other routes to publication than the traditional, take ages to, as David described, take ages to write your book, take ages to find an agent, take ages to find a publisher. There are other ways, whether it's just independent, where the timescales tend to be the same stages but maybe a bit shorter, or getting into anthologies as a start, writing short stories and building the name up, which used to be what the Asimovs and people like that used to do way back in the day. That was the model, if you like. So, and there are online platforms and lots of different ways. There's usually panels about self-publishing as well at many conventions. So, I think a new author has a lot to learn, and a convention is a good way to go about that.
I think I fell into that same trap of thinking, well, I don't have anything out at the moment. I haven't had anything out in a long time. And your imposter syndrome really kicks in as well when you're going out into the public and saying, "Yeah, I'm a writer too." So I think, well, FantasyCon was a bit intimidating for me. I thought about coming, but then I thought, you know what, let's do FantasyCon next year. It's a smaller event, easier way into it. So you've mentioned some of these conventions are specifically for networking for writers. So what do book fans and readers gain from attending these conventions?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where you kind of research the ones that you kind of that you should kind of go to, and that's like anything in the writing world. You kind of, if you're looking for an agent, you should research your agent to make sure that they like the stuff or want the stuff that you write and all that kind of stuff. But conventions are kind of the same, and there's a couple. I think if you see kind of like literary festival or something like that, it's probably one that is more based on kind of networking and that kind of inside the industry thing. But like when you look at kind of ones that like FantasyCon, like EasterCon, that are more open to readers, and what readers can get there is that they can meet the authors, they can get things signed, they can talk to them and hang out with them. They can go to panels where they can talk about, writers will talk pretty candidly about, their experiences and what they have coming next. And they can also meet other readers, and what a great thing about community is that it doesn't just stop at people that are like, writing or agents or editors. Community is also about people that are reading the books. It's all about that are reviewing the books. It's about people that are doing fan fiction, that are doing fan art. And the great thing about it as well, especially the way that publishing is going, because there are so many different avenues to bring a book to publication, is that if you are, say, someone that just considers themselves a reader, but you have got a talent, like you're an artist, or you are got an excellent eye for proofreading, or you have an excellent you're a seasoned reader. There's ways that you can become included in the industry, because you have people that are doing Kickstarters a lot of time these days, and they want artists, and they want people that can proofread, and they want beta readers and all this sort of stuff. So it's a good way to kind of come into it in that regards as well. But it is that thing where there's few barriers in terms of meeting people that are writing these things, and there are also trade halls where you've got people selling books, people selling special editions, other things as well. It's not just books. It's like merchandise, it's artwork, it's plushies, it's all sorts of stuff that you can think of. D&D stuff is there as well, so you've got all these things. So if you kind of looking at them and you are more kind of on the kind of reader side and you're thinking, is this the right one for me? A good thing is to look at, is there a trade hall? And what kind of things are at the trade hall? And if there is one and it's got like lots of different things, it's probably going to be more kind of reader orientated. And what's great, like Robin mentioned before, is that you get people that are doing readings, and a lot of the time it is from unpublished stuff that is on the way that might be a year or 2, 3 years away. So you get to hear it before anyone else, which is always nice.
Yeah, I don't think I've got anything to add to that.
Oh,
really.
Come on, Robin.
No, I was going to mention the reading thing again, but you're right. I mean, I remember at Dublin, which I'll hark back to again. John Scalzi was there, and indeed as he was in Glasgow, and I heard him reading from a work. So Dublin was in July, and this was a story that I think that was coming out in was it coming out in an anthology? I can't remember. It was a Christmas story, but he was reading it in July to a packed room, and his might be in his PR person was there as well, and she was reading the other part because it was quite a dialogue heavy scene. So and it was just like a little kind of mini theatrical performance almost. It was really great, and you wouldn't get that. And I mean, okay, yes, he could have put something like that online, I suppose, but you can, just by kind of sheer luck, you can happen into these things and experience something that you wouldn't really get a chance to experience anywhere else, probably. John Scalzi, but he's a bit of a DJ, and so at Glasgow Worldcon, he DJ'd a disco on one of the evenings, and these these things happen at conventions that really don't happen anywhere else, and they don't need to be big things like that. They can, as David said, it could be as personal as just having a very short conversation with an author that you really admire, and you probably don't get the chance to do that anywhere else. Get your book signed, get it personalized rather than just the signature, from meeting the person. So I think there's a lot for the reader at most conventions as well. Probably, but as David said, yeah, and I didn't mean to put people off going to Chimera, because there's although it is a festival, there's definitely things for a reading audience. There's a lot of great authors to just listen to. For example, there are also theatrical performances of like Terry Pratchett works and various things. There's an open mic where you tend to get a bit of song as well, a bit of fantasy based or genre based song filking, as they believe the correct term is. So even then, it's very varied, and there is a good trade hall at Chimera as well. Publishers, games, books, crafts, all sorts of things. So yes, there are many opportunities for fans and readers, I think, and maybe those don't get publicized as much as they should. Maybe some conventions could draw in more fans than they do. I'm not sure, but
Yeesh.
yeah.
So, with World Fantasy Con, what does the world bit mean? So, is it like an international authors and editors and agents, or is it just to make it sound better than
They
what
think it
Fantasy
sounds.
Con?
It's like
To make it
it's
sound
like
big.
the world.
Yeah.
It's like the World Series in baseball. It's like it's just America. Yeah.
Yeah. World
Well, the
Championship.
idea is
Yeah.
that it moves around. It's supposed to move all over the world each year. It's supposed to pop up in a different place. Tends to be a lot of the time in America and Canada. I say, it doesn't really come over to the UK that often, but that's essentially what it is. It's not just rooted in one place. It moves around, and with that, the idea is that it builds its own community of people that will travel to each one and go to the other different places, which is certainly the case for Worldcon. You get some people that go to every single Worldcon, no matter where it is, and that is the case for World Fantasy Convention as well. So there is that. And then obviously with it being world, it means that there's less barriers. There's more of a focus on kind of world guests that are coming over to it. They will kind of, like, the guests of honor are usually local to the country that it's held in, I believe, but it is kind of saying, like, everyone come over. It's a world community as opposed to like the like British community as example. Kind of lines are blurring on all these things anyway, because I mean, last year's FantasyCon, for example, that was in Chester, we had loads of people that were from the States, from Canada, from Ireland, from parts of Europe, from New Zealand as well, that came over for it. So it is kind of breaking down a little bit, but I think it's more tended to be saying that, like, this moves around the world. It's the intention of it.
Do you have a favorite memory from attending either Worldcon or World FantasyCon? Yeah.
That's very kind, David. My one is similar, and I didn't know David in 2019 in Dublin, so I didn't know that how much that I would enjoy meeting him at that time. But who I did meet in Dublin for the first time was members of a writing group that I'd been in online for, at that time, I think 6 years. I'd been in an online writing group, and the majority of the members were American. There's one Canadian, and there was a chap from the Netherlands. So about 7 or 8 of us met up in person for the first time, and I felt like I'd known these people for such a long time. And yes, we'd probably Zoomed a couple of times, or met online, but to meet them in person was such a pleasure, and I wouldn't have probably got that opportunity without the focus of Worldcon to bring us to the same place. So that was probably my strongest memory of that first convention, or the most personal one. The other thing was just the vastness of it, and the variation of it was really blew my mind at the time, and I was so filled with enthusiasm for my own writing and for just getting involved in the genre community, because even though Worldcon had been to Glasgow twice before, then I hadn't been to it because I wasn't really that aware of it, to be honest. But yes, so I guess that experience focused me in on how important it was to meet people, and that, not with a view to necessarily progressing, but just kind of organically, if you like, by the more people you know and the more you know about people and communicate with them, it opens, or certainly for me, it opened my mind to how publishing worked, how a lot of writing worked, and that there were different ways to kind of pursue
there's
where
a
I was
few.
trying to get
just picking
to
one. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm really grateful for conventions. I've met many people there that I consider very, very good friends now. That I speak to almost on a daily basis, one way or the other. To some ones that I go to in Ireland, where I see the people in real life almost on a daily basis that I'm very good friends with. People in the UK. I kind of got my diagnosis for autism around the time that I started going to conventions, and that kind of journey has been hand in hand, really, kind of meeting a lot of like-minded people at these things. I met my agent at a convention. I've launched books at conventions. Like, I've done a lot of things, but I think, like, it kind of like stands out the most, and I think it just speaks to what can happen at conventions. Was the very first one that I went to. I didn't really know anyone. I went with my best friend, and he was off somewhere, And it was like on the Sunday as everything was kind of winding down, and there was a few things going on. And I found myself at a kind of a loose end, and I was just wandering through like the bar, and Adrian Tchaikovsky was sat there on his own, and then just waved me over to come and chat to him. And I'd said hello to him a couple of times, hearing about the convention. So I was just sat there, like just chatting, like we'd known each other for quite a long time. And I was kind of in the back of my mind thinking, God, like I read all of his books. I started reading his books when I was like a teenager and what have you. Now here I am sat next to him. And then Anna Smith Spark wandered over and came and sat down with us as well. And we were all just kind of chatting. And I had this like kind of out of body experience, like what am I doing here? Like sat in between these two, listening and just thought like I'm a real person, and it just goes to show what can happen at these things, And I would say I'm good friends with both of them now. We've been at a lot of conventions, a lot of events together. We talk on the internet. We see each other outside of things like that as well. And it's the sort of things that can happen at these conventions, that just everyone is, as like I said before, like 90%, because obviously there is that element of people that you may not have a good experience with. It just happens, right? Some people may be having a bad time. Some people might be having a bad day. Some people are very, very socially awkward, and and get kind of anxious about social settings, even at conventions. So, but like 90% of the time, like it's always, you're always going to have like a very, very welcoming time with people. And 10% of the time, maybe it doesn't happen, or maybe it's just something that's going on. I mean, there are multiple day conventions in hotels or venues where it might be a bit. There's a lot of things to be going on. People may have had not a lot of sleep, not enough food, this kind of thing. So, like it always kind of try to treat people with a bit of grace and what have you.
Yeah, that's a bit of a top tip, actually, which maybe a lot of convention goers don't consider. Even ones who have been to multiple conventions but maybe haven't had the experience in the moment. But in Worldcon in Glasgow, I think it might have been on this Saturday. So kind of halfway in, I suppose, and it was the busiest day, and I can't quite remember what the circumstance was, but it wasn't, I don't think that I had a negative experience, but yeah, I don't know if there was a trigger. I can't even remember now, but I just suddenly became very low, and my mood became really low, and I don't know if it was a kind of imposter syndrome moment, which you mentioned, which I don't know who doesn't get it, but I certainly get it, and yeah, I had to go outside, and I just wanted to kind of sit by myself, and there's loads of people coming around and going backwards and forwards and what have you, and I just sat down and kind of stewed a little bit. It's in the sun. It was quite nice, and then someone just was walking past that I knew and asked how I was doing, and just started talking to me, and just totally lifted me out of that. But that's a top tip for a new or first time con goer, and maybe if someone's going on their own or they're going with someone, the dynamic's slightly different. But is to allow yourself, as the temptation is just to kind of keep going, I think, and keep going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. But sometimes you just stepping back and having a sort of solitary moment is maybe what we all need at some stage or other, just to kind of reset and change the pace a little bit. But so yeah, a memorable moment, I suppose, if not necessarily. I mean, it turned out to be a good one, but at the beginning, it wasn't a good one. Yeah.
So let's segue from what you just said about somebody going there for the first time. So if you were to write a short, rough guide to
get a
World
lot of
Fantasy
sleep the night
Con
before.
for somebody who's new to World Fantasy Con,
Make
what
sure you
things
have.
would you tell them
This,
to
what is the
do
rule?
on that first day?
It's three meals, 2 showers, 1 sleep, or something like that, isn't it? That's what they kind of say for when you're at a convention. But if you're going for the first time, if you can go with someone that you know, it's always takes a little bit of pressure off, right? And you do get some people that just go on their own, and they will make friends. It will happen, and people will see people on their own and say, "Come and join us," right? But yeah, if you can go with someone, it always takes pressure off. And as Robin was saying, on that first day, a lot of the time is just to kind of figure out where everything is. Don't try to go to everything. There will be clashes in terms of programming where there'll be some things on that you want to see both of them. Try and there is the temptation where it's like I'm going to go and watch as much stuff as I can, and you will kind of get tired, and you will get because you are in a hotel, conditioning on and all this kind of stuff, and it's a lot of hustle and bustle. So take breaks, make sure you're having the breaks, because usually during the breaks is the when you'll kind of start meeting people and chatting to people and making friends with people. And just to put on my kind of creative supporting creators hat, do go to the trade hall and do at least have a look around. No pressure to buy stuff, but have a look around, talk to them. If you like stuff that you see, take people's details to at least maybe check them out at a different time.
Just talking about this makes me realise now, or really winds up my enthusiasm and anticipation for for going to Brighton. And it's less than not quite, almost just exactly a month now, give or take. Yes, but it's good advice from David about trying to pace yourself. I've certainly made that mistake of probably in Dublin, of just trying to go to one thing after another, and you do get a bit of overload sometimes, or it's certainly possible to do that. It's worth watching out for.
Yeah. There's day tickets now available.
I mean, I'm feeling regret right now for not having bought a ticket when they were cheaper to come to WorldCon now, talking to you guys.
The FOMO.
Yeah. Okay, I might just come in
and
for a day or
us,
two.
Yeah, and you know us now, so you've got someone there you can.
Definitely. So, what impact do you think conventions like World Fantasy Con have on the visibility of fantasy fiction and other genre
it's
fiction?
A tricky one because I think
because I grew up as the weird kid who reads fantasy.
The convention runners
the weird kid who reads fairy tales.
So a different background of people. I think for a long time, I'm just speaking from experience from the British Fantasy Society and FantasyCon. There's a new for the last few years, there's been a new committee, and we're over 1,000 members now. But 4 years ago, we were at around 200 members, and FantasyCon was a lot smaller than what it is now, and it was a lot of kind of happy with the people that would come to this thing, right? Which was a certain type of person, okay? Which I don't have to explain it. I think you kind of can infer what I'm talking about. And when you're kind of doing that, you're never gonna grow, and in fact you'll shrink. Okay. And so one of the things that is the onus on convention runners is to reach out to more kind of marginalized groups, groups that usually don't go to these things, that don't kind of see themselves in these kind of things. So if you think of like fantasy books in the 80s and 90s, it was all white men on the cover with the occasional princess or what have you, wasn't it? And even if those characters were meant to look like that or not, they were always looked like a certain way on the cover. And it kind of makes people feel like I don't belong in this circle, and I don't belong in this genre. I don't belong, and that is up to us. So like me and Robin, and other people like us to kind of go, okay, well, how can we do better? How can we reach out to people that love this genre but don't feel like they belong in it and aren't sure, they're not being spoken to usually about this sort of stuff? And this isn't just about color. It's about religion. It's about culture. It's about class. It's about neurodiversity. It's about sexualities, gender. And when you do that, it'll help these things grow, and it'll help. There'll be more people will become more aware of these things. Because if it kind of shrinks and becomes insular, then no one's talking about it, and we're not finding new readers, we're not finding new creatives, and we're not allowing those people to have a voice and speak. So it's something that I can't speak to the World Fantasy Convention Board about this because we don't really have much to do with them. But in terms of the British Fantasy Society, it's something that we're very, very passionate about. We have brought in an outreach officer recently that has been doing a lot of work talking to people like Future Worlds Prize and other kind of societies that have been set up to kind of boost people's voices. We have a few things that are in the oven as well that are currently cooking. It will be announced pretty soon. But it is, the onus is on us to do it because that's the only way. Because what you do is you make it welcoming to people. You bring people in that wouldn't usually go to these things, and they go away and they tell their communities about it, and they go, "This was great. I felt so welcome. I had a really good time. Come to the next one," and they'll come to the next one, and they'll start talking about it, and it'll grow. And that is part of our job to do that. And it isn't just because we want the thing to grow and have more. There's a lot of reasons for doing it, but the reason is because we don't want to be unwelcoming to people, and we don't want to stagnate, and that is important.
Another aspect of the question to me is that, world fantasy, I think there's a pretty significant awareness of it in the genre and in genre circles, but I don't think there's that much awareness of it out with, and even Worldcon, which last year brought something like 7,000, 7,000 people to Glasgow. The awareness of it out with the genre sort of publishing sphere and fandom sphere was really quite low, and I think perhaps that's just because the committees and organisers don't feel a need to publicise it in mainstream circles or areas, possibly because those are more expensive venues to publicise, to advertise on. Like, you don't see Worldcon advertised on the side of a bus, for example, or with a half-page ad in the Times newspaper, because that would ruin the budget, presumably. But yet, but the fact that Worldcon, I suppose, can attract 7,000 people without advertising much beyond its own community, if I can say that, I guess is okay. But in terms of so when I think about the visibility of it, there's this. I hope I'm not going off track too much here, but there is still, I think, a snobbery. Some people will deny it, but I think there is a fairly clear snobbery between literature in the literary world and genre fiction, and that although there's certainly a willingness to claim the more elevated works that could easily be described as genre, but become literature, if you like, when they're claimed by the mainstream literary society, that element of the publishing world, literary publishing. So yes, how do we, is that, should we be, and David's talked a lot, very rightly so, about the outreach, and is there a need? It's a question. It's not it's not really a statement. Is there a need to also reach out to people who don't have an appreciation of genre at all? Those people who are not, like we probably all were, the weird kid who reads fantasy. To try, and it's a much bigger question, I suppose, to educate people that it's not, we're not all sitting there trying to rewrite Lord of the Rings, where there's a lot of very interesting, innovative, and perhaps quite daring speculative fiction that's being created that a mainstream audience doesn't really get a chance to see. So I guess I'm saying that maybe more could be done to publicise some of these world events, which, as David said, they're world events in the sense of them traveling around the world, but they are still pretty contained within the genre communities, you know.
Yes.
I think what
There's
you
lots
said
of
earlier,
us.
David, about trying to fit in.
There's lots of
I
us.
think that was another barrier for me to start attending these things, was that feeling that you'll be the only one who looks like you there. And by that I mean bald guy with a beard. So apparently there's lots of us. I think, yeah, I think joining the British Fantasy Society was my first step into realizing that, hold on, actually, it's a lot more diverse than you thought. And I think one of the upcoming events,
feel free to make a
we're looking
call
to
on
host
the
something on
through
Muslim
the
fantasy
anything that the British Fantasy
as a
can do to
panel.
help you. You know, we will
I think
definitely help with that.
December-ish,
It's
maybe.
a good couple. It's
Which
right. I mean,
reminds me, I
and
need to
even
come on my house
even
and go
last year's
find people to join
FantasyCon,
me on the
we did a
panel.
real great effort to improve the diversity of the people that were speaking at panels, people that were coming to it, and what have you. And we still got some feedback. And this is why we created the outreach position there, because we did get some feedback that there was a lot of time where where people were saying, I felt like I was the only person that looked like me in the room. And even though we felt that we had done a better job, and I think we did, there's still room to grow and there's still room to improve. And we never really want people to feel that way. No matter what it is, who they are, we never want them to feel alienated and isolated and or anything like that. So it's something that we need to do, and we can always do better with it.
Another tip would be to join often before. You mentioned joining the BFS, and that's an excellent first step for anyone. I would recommend that to anyone, and as a way to get an appreciation for the community, but also to become involved with it. The Discord servers are full of. I'm not sure how many people are on the BFS Discord without going and checking, but it's a very vibrant community, and there's all sorts of different rooms, if you like, or threads on different topic areas, and including conventions. And so I think the World Fantasy has its own Discord as well, which it does, doesn't it? And I know Chimera has one which just runs all year, although it's not very active, and apart from around about convention time. But that's a great way in the lead up, in 2 or 3 weeks, however long before a convention, of getting involved in conversation, and which can very quickly lead to I'll see you at I'll see you at World Fantasy, or I'll see you at Chimera, or whatever, and you can break the ice with people in a very kind of gentle way, with casual, conversation, without having to approach someone in the same way physically. So yeah, the chatting online is if that's something that people are comfortable with, is a good way to almost kind of build a little mini network, or make some contacts before the convention starts, and have someone hopefully to speak to straight away, almost before you get there.
I think you're both doing an amazing job of selling World Fantasy Con. So to bring things to a head, give me your one-line pitch to convince anyone who's not convinced yet to come to World Fantasy Con.
Okay. For me, I would say, we all have specific areas of interest within fantasy, with subgenres, or whatever it is, or different areas of creation, and that whatever your interest, whether it's in reading books, or listening to audiobooks, or listening to readings, gaming, that there's something for you there. There's something that you will find interesting. There are panels that you'll want to go to. If you haven't seen the program yet, you will find something on there, because the programmers have done a little bit of convention programming, but the work that goes into ensuring that a program is varied and that there's something for everyone is significant. And so, yeah, I would be
one line, Robin. One line.
eat my hat, as the old saying goes, if someone couldn't find something or multiple things
creative
to
editing.
interest them at the convention, because it's really very varied and very welcoming. And it's a bit of a cliche, but there is something for everyone, I think.
Beers, karaoke.
That was a very, very long line. There was several semicolons in there, but it was.
Well,
I got to the one line
wasn't
at
long
the end,
enough.
which
Yeah,
was that
didn't
there
have
is
enough
something for everyone.
Didn't have enough clarity. Well, there's lots of talks about books. There's lots of opportunity to drink beers or any other kind of drinks that you would like to partake in, and there is very often at least one.
You're gonna have to give a bit more of explanation.
I see your line wasn't long. Your line wasn't long enough, David.
There's lots of book launches as well, which give you like free food and free drinks and everything. So yeah, so it's all in there in one.
And then, other than World Fantasy Con, what else have you both got going on in terms of book launches or?
I have. I'm finishing off book 4 in the Cork and Moth series, writing that, but I've got no clue when it might appear as I sit here at the moment. I've got a couple of short stories that are hopefully coming out in anthologies fairly soon, but quite focused on our podcast at the moment, which is a 2-week cycle. So pretty much one comes out, I start editing the next one, and it kind of rolls together. But we've got several interviews coming up to do, and several episodes in the bank that are still to be edited. So yeah, we're programmed through
I have
to
a new
early
book out on
January
October 24th. Just did the cover review for it today, and the pre-order is up. It's called Magic
I'm
Maps
really enjoying
Mischief. It is a cozy
the experience with David and I chatting to all sorts of people. It's really interesting to be on the other side of the microphone and the questions today, though. It's been great fun.
So that is out on October 24th. So it's been quite a path to publication, this one. So I'm really excited to actually have it almost out there and people know about it and can see it now. The cover is amazing. It was done by an artist called Liz Delton, who is extremely talented. And yeah, so please check that out if you want to see a world without paracetamol but autism still exists.
Thank you very much, David and Robin, for joining me today and giving us a whistle-stop tour of World Fantasy Con. And with that, I'd like to thank the audience again for listening. Please do not forget to like, share, and comment, and subscribe. The podcast needs your support to grow. The more of you that support and follow us, the more likely we are to get people like David and Robin, Adrian and Anna Smith-Spark on the show. So with that, until next time, keep dreaming, keep writing, and let your story shine. Thank you very much.